From 1948 to 1994, South Africa endured a rigid political system of racial segregation and discrimination against its black citizens. This system was called apartheid. Today, anti-Israel speakers are misusing the word apartheid to spread a lie that delegitimizes the state of Israel.
Brick by brick, wall by wall, Israeli apartheid has to fall.
Olga Meshoe is a South African attorney and activist who says this characterization of Israel is false and makes a mockery of the struggle her parents and grandparents endured under apartheid.
I read an article about you and it said you were Israel's warrior. And so I was like, that's very interesting. What sparked your passion for Israel?
Well, I'm a Christian, and so I have that pretty much basic foundation with regards to the love for Israel and the importance of Israel. If it weren't for the Jews, if it weren't for Judaism, we wouldn't have our faith. But then I have a big mouth, and I enjoy reading and being educated about various things. And I came across this organization called the BDS, Boycott, Divest and Sanction, and how they were taking South Africa's heritage, its legacy from an apartheid perspective, and were giving it to a people that had absolutely nothing to do with apartheid. And I recognized together as a result, in particular with what my dad had been doing in his pro-Israel advocacy work, that there was a need for more voices to stand up and say something about it.
Can you describe to me what life was like for Black South Africans when it was under apartheid?
It was horrible, it was wicked, and it shouldn't happen again in any nation in the world. With the laws that were implemented, black people, white people, just because of the color of their skin, their different cultures, were separated. Families were separated because of the complexion of their skin. You couldn't live together. We had separate areas within the country that black people could stay and not stay. And in fact, if you wanted to move within your own country from place to place, even from suburb to suburb, you had to carry a document that was called the Dompas. And if you were not back home in your homeland where you had been assigned, you got arrested and trialed and just kept in detention without any sort of trial. Our schooling system as black people was designed in a way that would make black people deliberately dumb. We weren't allowed to pretty much rise above a particular level. Our hospitals, our medical centers, opportunities to go to restaurants, to public places such as the beach. We couldn't use public transportation. All of those were denied to us as black people just because we look different. And so when you then look at a land like Israel, then you're like, but hang on, Jews and Arabs hang out together all the time. They're in the Knesset. My father, who's now a parliamentarian in South Africa, could not have been in parliament at that time. My parents weren't even allowed to vote. So how do you give somebody another nation that is totally democratic? She's not perfect, but show me a nation on this earth that is. How do you give that narrative to a people that have got absolutely nothing in comparison to apartheid? It's actually, I call it wicked. It's disgusting. And it pretty much trivializes and makes a mockery of what my parents went through, of the struggle, in fact. If South Africa was like this apartheid Israel that they talk about, we wouldn't have needed a need for the struggle because we would have been integrated and black people would have had the same opportunities as white people at that time.
So when you went to visit Israel, were you shocked by what you saw?
Yes, ma'am.
Considering all the things you had heard?
Yes, ma'am. I remember in particular when we took 27 young people from South Africa to go and see Israel for themselves. Because it's very powerful if you can say, I've seen X, Y, and Z, and this is why I say what I say. Our driver was a Muslim, an Arab, and our tour guide was a white Jew. And immediately they were like, okay, but hang on. During apartheid, we weren't allowed to have people sit next to each other, in fact, be with each other at the same place. We went to the Knesset, we went to the markets, we went into different working places, and we saw such intermingling and such diversity of people. It's a lie to try and label Israel an apartheid state. So we were very shocked, very surprised, and in fact, we were saddened that the world believes what is being said about Israel.
Oh. So out of your passion, you started an organization called DEISI. Tell me about DEISI and what it stands for.
Sure. So DEISI was in fact started by my father, the Reverend Olga Meshoe, and he said pretty much that this boycott, divest and sanctions movement, in fact any movement across the world that's using the apartheid narrative in particular, the response has to come from South Africa because that's where apartheid happened, and in particular it's got to be black South Africans who suffered through it and who experienced it. So DEISI stands for Defend, Embrace, Invest in and Stand by or Support Israel. And we're primarily about creating platforms of education and truth so that people can be equipped with truth, can be equipped with facts as to, does Israel that they say is an apartheid state issue really, or is there another agenda that's being used at the same time?
And so one thing I thought was very interesting, you said that you feel like Africa can really benefit from Israel's technology and their agriculture. How can you see a partnership between Israel and Africa, South Africa, or any country in Africa being beneficial?
Well, Israel is pretty much a desert, and she's prospering, she's sprawling, and she's able to, and she has been able to produce so much crops. Fortunately, at this moment in time, my country is going through a desert, but through drip technology, Israel can help us to be able to produce crops so that people can actually feed themselves and not starve. In my country, young boys, they have circumcision processes that they go through when they're about 13, when they transition from a cultural perspective into manhood. And many of them die in the mountains because of botched circumcisions that take place. But Israel has a solution that can help us. We think about the terrorist attacks that are happening in North and East Africa, and Israel has got security intelligence that can really assist Africa. And so we need to make a decision that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that we say is our God, he's their God too, and so we need to stand together in solidarity with them.